Welcome to Fringe Toast. My name is Bobby D, and this is a side order of Fringe Toast. And tonight, as you can tell, we're not doing video, but I am going to be going through this presentation with Michael Fox of Fox Paranormal. This is his second time on our show, and we really appreciate him being on.
Looking forward to doing it tonight and see if we can get some good information out there.
Yeah, so some people don't even know what EVPs are, and then there are others who know what an EVP is, but doesn't understand like how the classification systems is probably talking about that is probably aimed more at people who actively do paranormal investigations. People have been doing it for a while. I wanted to get your input on this because you've been in the field for such a long time. An EVP, or electronic voice phenomenon, is the mysterious sounds of disembodied human-like voices of unknown origin that are heard through electronic devices. So this is essentially a subcategory of ITC, or instrumental transcommunication.
Correct.
Typically experienced, the EVPs are typically experienced through three methods of investigation. The voice recordings, ghost boxes, or something called an ovulus. So to run you down a definition on all those, a voice recording kind of being something that you would record via either an analog cassette tape on an old recorder, like a recorder. They have digital versions of that now that actually work really well. There's nothing wrong with the old school stuff, but the digital versions are more readily available. I mean, you could just about go to any Walmart around the area and find a digital recorder, at least to some degree. I'm not going to say it's the best one, but you can find a digital recorder, voice recorder, at just about any Walmart or Target or Best Buy around. Ghost or spirit boxes, things like the S box or the SB7 or what did you say? Well,
SB11.
SB11, which is what you have here in front of us. And I'll drop a photograph of that SB11 on the video format of this recording, so everybody understands what that looks like as well. The ovulus is more of a word bank. Someone programmed a whole bunch of a library of words, and that number of words ranges from anywhere from 2,000 to 20,000. That's the same way that you might hear the apps work on your phone. It's just a word bank, and it cycles through. But in any event, there has been there is at least one association or group that I guess has come together and seems to encapsulate all these different classification systems that we're going to talk about. And the one they really have, the Association for Transcommunication, has divided ITCs in general into two different types of communication, right? Type 1 is transformative, type 2 being opportunistic. Type 1 is transformative, transient sounds of pitch matching a human voice projecting through ambient noise of the room, and that's stuff like what you might record on an analog recorder or digital recorder. Opportunistic is made up of material that pre-exists. Spirit box, Frank's box, S box, SB7, things like the electronic speech synthesis. That's the Ovulus, the Equivox, the Necrophonic app, which, regardless of how I feel about Huff Paranormal and his tactics, he did put together a fairly good app with that, in my opinion. We had positive results out of it the first time that I had an outing with you guys.
Yes, we did, with the portal.
Yes, with the portal, when we were at Chaos Haunted House in Carrollton. I mean, we experienced, for those of you who aren't aware, you can find the video over on Fox Family's YouTube page, and then Matt and I do a recap video after our time with you where we talked about it a little bit more. And I mean, somebody was playing Johnny Cash, and all of a sudden, out of this necrophonic hooked up to through the portal, Johnny Cash was playing, and something was singing along with him.
Exactly. Yes.
So that was wild stuff, man. So let's go ahead and move on forward with this stuff. So essentially, what I found was 4 different scales and systems for evaluating EVPs: the RODIVE scale, the ESTEP system, the AA-EVP system, and the KM system. Any of those, I mean, have you heard of any of that?
I've heard of most of them. Basically, we just use the A, B, and C system on how we classify our EVPs.
Right, and that seems to be a pretty standard across all
Yeah.
4 of these systems, is at least an A, B, C categorization. As a matter of fact, here we are. Class A is essentially clear to hear without explanation. Class B may require some direction. Class C and D generally not easily heard or understood. The systems that go into that D category, those go into some very serious, like some deep, detailed classifications. So the first one I'm going to talk about is the RODIVE scale. And essentially how the RODIVE scale is broke down as Class A. Voices can be heard and identified by someone with normal hearing and knowledge of the language spoken. No special training of the ear is needed to detect them. Class B, voices speak more rapidly and more softly, but are still quite plainly audible to a trained and attentive ear. Class C, voices give us a great deal of information and much paranormal data. Unfortunately, these can be heard only in fragments, even by a trained ear, but with improved technical aids, it may eventually become possible to hear and demonstrate these voices which lie beyond our range of hearing without trouble. So I took that Class C as being how you kind of explained to me the time that I was a guest on your show, when you were like, I pull up the waveform file and see if there's a fluctuation there, and that allows me to pinpoint where there was a potential anomaly.
Right.
And then you can isolate that and dig deeper into it and see what you hear, see what someone else hears. It's not quite clear enough where anybody could understand it, but someone who has experience in paranormal investigation, someone who has experience listening to these types of anomalies, would be able to distinguish it as being an anomaly, and maybe even be able to analyze it to the point to where there's something there to recollect.
Right. I mainly use it to identify usually human voices picked up under a certain frequency base. And a lot of times I found over the years with EVPs, they're much lower frequency than a standard human voice. And that's what I'm looking for when I do a voice analysis.
Right.
I'm looking for the lower frequency voices.
Right, and then you're going to dive deeper into that that wave file. So over on the ESTEP system, it's going to be fairly similar. Class A voices are loud and clear. They can be duplicated onto other tapes, can be heard without headphones. Voices aren't as loud and clear and can often be heard without headphones. Voices are faint and whispery. Headphones must be worn to hear them, and rarely can all the words be interpreted. That there again, Class C is exactly what you're talking about, where that wave file is very, very important in identifying where this faint or whispery voice is going to be found. And you're actually wearing the headphones that you have to use in order to...
Yeah, these are exact headphones that I use when I do voice analysis.
Right.
So,
So the next one up is the AA-EVP system. EVP is a message that can be heard without headphones and that people can generally agree on its content. EVP requires headphones to distinguish message content, and not everyone will agree on the message. That's Class B.
yeah.
Class C is EVP requires headphones, often needs amplification and filtering, and will seldom even be heard by others.
That's probably the system I most generally go by.
Is whether or not it can be agreed upon by others?
Yes.
Right.
You know, your Class Bs definitely have to have headphones. And sometimes it's not everybody hears the same thing.
Right.
But when you hear a Class A EVP, you could hear it without headphones or earbuds. It's very clear and distinguishable, and you're able to understand exactly what's being said.
Right. You could play it in a room full of people.
Yes.
And they understand what's going on there.
Right.
The KM system, this is a longer one. They have Class 1. That's spirit voice is a direct response to a human statement, question, action, activity, or spirit voices respond to each other.
Uh-huh.
Most of or all of the words are clear and intelligible with or without headphones. Spirit voice communicates comprehensible and existentially meaningful expression of thoughts, feelings, emotions, opinions, actions, or intentions.
Mm-hmm.
So the last one that we just looked at, the AA-EVP system, that was more so a system that was based on the person who's experiencing it,
Mm-hmm.
where this KM system seems to be, right off the bat in Class 1, seems to be more about the content, whether or not the individual is, the context in which the EVP is heard, whether or not the investigator was trying to make contact.
Yeah.
If there was a direct response, so forth and so on. Class 2 of that KM system, voice is generally is a general statement and not a direct response to a statement, question, action, or activity by humans. Most of all the words are generally clear and understandable with or without headphones. Spirit voice communication is comprehensible and existentially a meaningful expression of thoughts, feelings, emotions, opinions, actions, or intentions.
I don't know if I agree with that one.
Why do you say this?
Thoughts, feelings, I don't know. On a Class 2,
I mean, if it wasn't a direct response to anything that you're aware of, then how could you even come to Class 2?
yeah.
I mean, it's the spirit voice communication is comprehensible and existentially a meaningful expression of thoughts, feelings, emotions, opinions, actions, or intentions. How is any of that possible if bullet A isn't received?
Exactly. That's kind of where I was going with that. I think you and I are on the same page on that one.
Right.
Because, you know, that's so broad-based, the way that's written out.
Right.
And I think, you know, for most people to keep it a little more grounded,
Mm-hmm.
you need to stick with the Class 2s as being, having to be amplified or using headphones, but you're still looking for responses to direct questions.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's the only way you're going to substantiate your voices that you're hearing.
Right. I understand. I think we are on the same page here.
Yeah.
Class 3, spirit voice is a sound other than the spoken word. That includes growls, screams, humming, etc. Musical instruments, TV, radio, concerts, footsteps, rapping, banging, barking, etc. Almost like background noise, with the exception of the growl, screams, and humming. Have you ever experienced the growl, screams, or humming?
I've experienced growls, screams, humming, footsteps on EVPs. Yeah. Never have I experienced TV or radio.
Yeah, that I mean, you would almost if you did hear a TV or a radio, you would almost definitely believe that maybe somehow or another
Ambient noise.
something happened. Somebody
Yeah.
turned something on.
Yeah, ambient noise.
Right. But if you're alone on an investigation and you know that there's nothing like that going on, and all of a sudden you hear a TV or radio, that would be interesting to pick up.
Yeah, it depends on where you're doing your investigation. If you're out at a cemetery, I mean, even if you're not alone, there's 2 or 3 of you there, and you know there's no radio or television out there, and you pick up a radio or television,
Right.
then that's something you want to look a little closer at.
So, Class 4 is from what they have under the subtitle null or valueless, means that it's probably not going to be distinguishable at all. The EVP contains nothing of value in understanding the spirit realm or spirit psychology. Words are unintelligible with or without headphones. Spirit voice does not communicate comprehensible and existentially meaningful expressions of thoughts, feelings, emotions, opinions, actions, or intentions, although the words may be intelligible. So, I think that has value here. Again, I think that we're in agreement that the Class 2 out of this particular classification system probably isn't a necessary one.
No.
It's over complicating what should be a cut and dry thing.
Well, the Class 4, I could abbreviate that form real quickly and just put Class 4, when in doubt, throw it out.
Yeah, I've heard you say that more than one time before.
Yeah.
So I think ultimately for one, I don't know that all investigators are even aware that they should adopt at least some kind of a classification system. Let alone whether or not there's a standard out there for all investigating teams to be using the same one, so that they could trade notes. I think that from a scientific perspective, there's like ESTM. That's a standard that is put in place for manufacturers of all different types of goods in the U.S. And a lot of those ASTM standards require certain tests by certain labs and whatnot, and those tests have to be done in a certain fashion. I mean, the specifications are very, very detailed about how a test needs to happen. They even have, it's very standard. It's very one foot in front of the other. That way, across the board, everyone is in an understanding of what test occurred. And I believe that there should be an agreement on a scaling system. I think that it would be beneficial for paranormal investigating and parapsychology in general for a system to be adopted that could be universally used.
Oh, I totally agree.
And that way, if a team goes in a month before you do, they could give you their notes and their classifications on their result, what they experienced there, and it would be in a single format that you could easily understand, because you in fact yourself are using the same classification system. But I seem to think that I believe that it would be very, very difficult to rein all that in, because right now it's the wild, wild west of the paranormal investigating. I mean, it's more popular than it's ever been before. It's more accepted by mainstream than it has ever been before.
Yeah, it is.
And trying to tell someone who just wants to jump into this field all willy-nilly that they have, that there's a way to do things and how they should do things, I think would play. I don't think it would go over well. Is what I'm saying. And trying to rein that in, I guess what would have to occur is like a situation where a school certifications would have to be given out to people for knowing types of things, like a certain scale that needed to occur, or they needed to abide by. I know that my opinion right now is probably not going to be found with a whole lot of positivity, but I also am of the opinion that just because somebody doesn't want to hear it doesn't mean it doesn't need to be said.
Exactly. Now, I'm very fortunate because I was able to work under Mark Constantino in the early years, which Mark and his wife were known as the pioneers of EVP work.
Okay.
They were considered, top of the scale on experts. Television shows were after them constantly. They traveled all over the world, analyzing EVPs. And I got to know Mark when he was alive and worked with him in the early years. And he taught me a lot of his techniques on how to analyze EVPs. And I use a lot of what I learned from Mark now that I learned, years ago, as far as how I'm classifying them, how I'm working them out. Basically, you're right. Class A it's an untouched EVP, clear. You can understand it. You know what's being said. You can make the connection. But you can create a Class C if you overwork an EVP. If you start running it through, start slowing it down, start speeding it up, start amplifying it. It's not real good practice. Sometimes it is necessary. I have pulled some very solid messages out doing that, where you hear what sounds like gibberish under normal speed, but when you slow it down, you start picking out sentences.
Oh, right. But you could, before you even started manipulating it, you could totally hear an intelligible voice.
Yeah, you could tell there was something there.
Right.
But it sometimes I've noticed, on some EVPs, when you get a spirit voice, when it's relaying itself over your electronic device, sometimes it comes down like super fast speed.
Okay.
But you gotta take in consideration their existence versus our existence and where they're at. And that could play a lot in what we are receiving on the receiving end that they're sending. So sometimes if you slow it down, you're able to understand what they're saying.
Right.
Now, as far as amplification, I'm a firm believer I'd never go over 2 amplifications. If I have to go above 2 amplifications to understand what it's saying, I'm done with it.
Right. Okay. Well, at least there's, and so even with me saying that, I've also heard. Are you familiar with backwards speak?
Yes.
So,
yes.
I'm a firm believer that there's something to that.
Oh yes, there is.
But I don't know. Taking audio evidence. Have you ever taken audio evidence and reversed it?
Yes, I have.
And with any success?
Yes, I've had success in reversing it and actually getting a clear message or communication in reverse that I didn't understand in forward.
Okay. All right. Well,
Yeah.
That's interesting to know. The David John Oates, I don't know if you're familiar. He's in a backward speech analyst from Australia, and he does all kinds of research in that field. But I don't think that he may have never looked into the paranormal. But is this pretty well practiced? Is that something that's done on a regular basis? Because I've never heard of anyone doing that before.
Well, it is done, especially with the more trained individuals. It's worked with EVPs that know how to do it. You have to have the right program, the right software to do it. You really have to invest some money because you can't just use anything out there. You've got to have good quality.
Right.
The program I use is the same programs a lot of studios use to make CDs. So it is a very good quality. I did have to purchase this program. It was not free, and it was expensive. But I've used the heck out of it over the years.
Wow. Do you are you in support of well, I think that I can make assumptions here that you are in support of a classification system, but
Yes, I am in support of a classification system. Now, I've always been more on the scientific side of paranormal investigating, where Destiny, everybody knows my wife Destiny with Fox Paranormal. She's more on the spiritual side, but she's brought me from the books to the spiritual side quite a bit over the years, where I've learned so much from her on her techniques and her ideas, the way things are happening, that I've been able to incorporate that with my scientific side.
Right. Do you? Also, I wish there was some way that we could get everybody on the same page, but I just think maybe I'm just I'm tugging on Superman's cape.
Yeah. No, you'll never get everybody on the same page because everybody has different opinions.
Right.
You have people out there that's only been in the paranormal field 6 months calling themselves experts.
Right.
And in my opinion, there is no real expert because we're always constantly learning.
Right. Well, I mean, we're talking about something here that, there's a certain amount of the population that doesn't even believe it exists anymore.
I've been investigating now for over 30 years, and I still don't call myself an expert. So I don't understand how somebody can get on television, it's been doing it 6 months, say, I'm a paranormal expert.
Right. And there's probably a great deal of that going on.
There is. I see it all the time, and I kind of chuckle when I hear it. But
well, they're put on they're put on as a personality, or they're put on as a face in front of a camera.
Right.
The studio is trying to make money at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And if they can put a cartoon character in front of people, then they certainly will.
It's all about ratings.
Absolutely. Or someone who can, exactly, get those ratings.
Yeah.
Even if it means just stirring up drama just for the sake of doing so. But I just really that's really it. I know we haven't been recording for very long. This is a side order. It wasn't intended to be a very long episode. I do appreciate your time being here. If this is your first time tuning in to Fringe Toast, most of the time we do have video. Unfortunately, Matt isn't available today, so I was forced to do an episode on the road by myself. So you didn't get any camera at all. But in any event, go ahead and hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. You guys can find all of our content and all of our social media links over at fringetoast.com. You can find a link for that down in the description box down below. Thank you very much for your time. Have a wonderful evening.